Welcome everyone. My name is Deanna. I'm a program assistant for the BC Brain Wellness Program. Thank you all for joining us for today's April Research Seminar Series. I'm thrilled to be your MC for this online gathering. Today we will have a distinguished guest, Shelly Rosenblum, who will be exploring two fundamental modes of understanding the world, art and science, and the powerful and surprising ways they connect. Before we get started, I'd like to first acknowledge that the BC Brain Wellness Program is at the Jawad Mofajian Center for Brain Health, which is situated on the traditional, ancestral, and unceded territories of the Musqueam people. I'm joining you today from Vancouver, the traditional, ancestral, and unceded territories of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh nations. As all of you are joining from different places today, I encourage us all to take a moment to reflect and give thanks to the lands where we are privileged to work, learn, and play from, with a resource pasted in the chat for you to see where the nations from your land. I would like to take a moment to also thank our program donors for supporting the BC Brain Wellness Program. Because of your generosity, we are able to provide these educational events and our online classes through the program. As an entirely donor-funded program, we rely on your generosity to ensure the continuation and development of our program, and we wouldn't be able to do it without you. So thank you so much for your ongoing support. And so I would love to take on the pleasure of introducing our distinguished guest speaker for today's research seminar series, Shelly Rosenblum, Curator of Academic Programs at the Belkin Gallery, University of British Columbia, Vancouver. Inaugurating this position, Shelly's role is to develop programs that increase myriad forms of civic and academic engagement at UBC, the wider Vancouver community, and beyond. Rosenblum received her PhD at Brown University and has taught at Brown, Wesleyan, and UBC. Her awards include fellowships from the Center for the Humanities, Wesleyan University, and multi-year presidential postdoctoral research fellowship, Department of English, UBC. Her research interests include issues in contemporary art and museum theory, discourses of the Black Atlantic, critical theory, narrative, and performativity. She received 2 terms, on the board of directors at the Western Front Artist Run Center, Vancouver, including serving as board president. At UBC, she is an affiliate of the Peter Wall Institute for Advanced Studies. And without further delay, let's welcome Shelly to the virtual stage. The floor is all yours.
Hi, everyone. Thank you, Diana, so much for that introduction. Thank you to our Nima and to Elaine for helping to arrange this and for the generous invitation to be with you today. I'm really thrilled to have the opportunity to share some of the Belkin's work in this forum. It's not a very long time to speak, so I'm going to limit myself to talking about 3 projects that we've engaged in trying to bridge between art and science. And I hope that we'll have time for fulsome discussion afterwards. Please do feel free to be in touch with me after the talk if you have further ideas or suggestions for research or to learn more about any of these programs. And I'll also direct you after to our website where there's lots of information, of course, on upcoming events, but also documentation and more detailed description of all the projects I'm going to describe today. And I encourage you as well to get on our mailing list, whether you're logging in from near or far away to participate actually and virtually in some of the things that we do. So thanks so much for being here and sharing this hour, and thanks for the invitation. So I'll be talking about art and science projects where we try to find ways to bridge between the disciplines and develop a new way of engaging them. I'll be focusing on 3 examples today: a class where we collaborated with a medical school here an exhibition where we collaborated with the Center for Brain Health, and a research cluster where we're engaged in an ongoing collaboration with the Stuart Blossom Quantum Matter Institute and the Department of Physics. For those of you who are nearby and haven't visited before, this is what the Belkin looks like. We're at the north end of Main Mall, near the other arts and culture venues. This is a photograph that was taken when we had a banner up by Louis Kamnitzer, and it says, "The museum is a school. The artist learns to communicate. The public learns to make connections." And I think I'll leave that up for a moment. I hope that we can engage in that promise that Kamnitzer put up on the gallery for us. So we'll begin with a class. My position at the Belkin was established to develop initiatives focused on teaching and learning, research and scholarship, and the arts, and across the curriculum. In short, initiatives that speak to the abiding educational value of an academic gallery. It really grew out of a diagnosis of a problem at many universities. Why are so many excellent campus museums and galleries not better integrated into the university's mission, pedagogical research, outreach, and experience? We had some obvious partners at the gallery with the departments of art history, English, film and theater, to name a few. But I wanted to make an argument about how the kind of work that goes on in an art gallery is also fundamentally useful to people across campus who didn't necessarily see themselves as our partners. The medical school was an obvious place to start. There's a lot of research on generative relationships that can happen between art and medicine. So we started talking to the med school, and they were very excited to see the empirical evidence of successful programs at other universities. It's become somewhat of a standard practice at some med schools to work with galleries, but in these cases, they almost always look at historical works and typically scenes of illness. We at the Belkin wanted to build upon the advances that had already been made in the field, but as a gallery that specializes in contemporary art, there's something particularly useful in a collection that specializes in post-war avant-gardes and contemporary art and the work of better training medical students. What was serendipitous was that at the same time, the medical school was launching a new curriculum. One of the innovative aspects of the new curriculum was that it's structured in flex time, which is enhanced learning in addition to the regular curriculum. So students have a lot of choice about what they'd like to explore, and quite a number of these courses fall under an arts and humanities category. Together with now Emeritus Professor Dr. Caroline Cornea, who was Assistant Dean of Student Affairs at UBC's Faculty of Medicine then, I collaborated with her to create Art in Medicine, Rounding at the Belkin, a course that invited medical students to consider how engaging with art could strengthen observational skills in the sciences. In accordance with the Belkin's mandate to develop initiatives in teaching, learning, research, and scholarship across the university, this course and the medical humanities program on which it is based are part of our broader commitment to interdisciplinary learning. The program welcomed a cohort of UBC medical students to explore questions about human relationships, emotions, beliefs, and opinions through art. It was organized around several themes: narrative, objectivity, embodiment, empathy, power, ambiguity, and care. While the clinical work of the doctor is conducted at a rapid pace and high volume, the museum environment offers medical students the opportunity to slow down. Through close looking and object-based exercises, they were given the time and space to develop interpersonal and communication skills, discuss the big issues and challenges of their profession, and make room for the emotions both they and their patients feel in the clinical setting. I'm going to put up one of the works from the collection we spent a lot of time looking at and leave it there for some time for you to also slow down and look. Art in Medicine was inspired by the growing body of research that demonstrates an improvement amongst doctors in their ability to look carefully, think critically about what they see, and empathize with others when they engage with visual art. Over the span of 6 weekly meetings, students were encouraged to visually analyze works from the Belkin's permanent collection and exhibition programming. The course was structured around what cognitive psychologist Abigail Housen and art educator Philip Yanwini call visual thinking strategies. As Riley et al. Have pointed out, BTS protocols have much in common with the process of group diagnosis in medical practice. By enhancing students' abilities to look systematically, they are able to more strongly identify and defend what they see. At the same time, collective analysis of works of art asks students to engage in a field in which they are not expert. Prompted by the facilitator and their peers, students must defend their impressions by means of what they can actually see in the work in front of them. Consequently, they must learn to accommodate multiple ideas and interpretations at the same time, and to build upon new layers of understanding while remaining grounded by visual evidence. In doing so, students have the opportunity to consider the biases or pre-existing assumptions that they might bring to a work and its subsequent interpretation, a process that has significant resonance with doctor-to-patient communication. Looking at art in this way becomes an evidence-based practice, revealing the parallels and observational methods that are intrinsic to the disciplines of art and medicine, as well as in the sciences more generally. It also asks students to collect evidence without the assumption of certainty or a single right answer. This aspect of the course enhances students' tolerance for ambiguity. This is an important skill in a field where much remains unknown. The collective process relies upon the respectful but critical processing of different points of view in order to arrive at the most substantiated understanding of the works. And what really resonated for the deans at the medical school when we proposed this was that increasing an ability to tolerate ambiguity is a fundamental part of medical pedagogy that we have to find avenues to explore. In addition to this work on developing skills in observation, description, and meaning making, we're trying to develop speculative thinking. And we hope that in further flex periods, some of the students might take on seeds from this experience for research in any avenue, whether it's neuroaesthetics or work in thinking about medical pedagogy or other connections between art and science. If that means they're going to work with the university collection, art collection, that's wonderful for us. But if that means different kinds of research that will culminate in research and publications that share where this work will go, that too would be wonderful. So all the work happens in the gallery, but ultimately the students bring this back to the medical school to affect change there. And it's this reciprocity that also really interested us. The real takeaway for the participants was an ability and an invitation to slow down. And in this slowing down, to sit with a not knowing always. And within this space, to find a way to move forward with another person or with a group in this discomfort, in this dis-ease. And it's a kind of resilience and radical empathy that we found was developed in the program. And versions of this course continue today. About the same time this course launched, I was doing research on the relationship between neuroscience and art. We were gearing up for an exhibition built around the drawings of Santiago Ramon y Cajal, whose drawings illustrating brain entrances artists, curators, and neuroscientists. They're still used for educational purposes in the medical school and textbooks and are concrete examples of the overlapping of neuroscience and art. So this exhibition was in 2017, but it continues to resonate in really wonderful and often unanticipated ways. It was a wonderful experience working with the Center for Brain Health, building relationships that led to teaching together and research projects. And so I'm really excited to share this experience of the exhibition with you. It's not so often that you look at an exhibition with the help of the very apparatus that is its subject, but so it was with the beautiful brain, the drawings of Santiago Ramon y Cajal, one of the Belkin's most unusual exhibitions. It presented 80 small notebook renderings and shifting combinations of ink and pencil by the Spanish neuroanatomist who was born in 1852 and lived till 1934. These are considered among the world's greatest scientific illustrations. Together, they describe a fantastic netherworld of floating forms, linear networks, bristling nodes, and torrential energies. They posit the thing between your ears as an immense cosmic universe, or at least one of the most intricate of all of nature's creations. That the images are also undeniable as art only adds to the complexity of the experience. This exhibition really represented a union of the arts and sciences and is very clear evidence of how visual creativity and careful observation is as essential to the sciences as it is to the arts. It's also worth noting that at the time Cajal was working in Spain, the arts and sciences were not nearly as divided and siloed disciplinarily as they are now. And Cajal would have been mingling in the same circles as poets and painters, with everyone sharing their discoveries and their ideas. Something we should aspire to, I think. It was our hope at the Belkin that the exhibition would contribute to this culture of cross and interdisciplinarity and collaborations across campus. It did, and actually it really still does. Cajal is considered the founder of modern neuroscience, as important in his field as Charles Darwin or Louis Pasteur are in theirs, though relatively unknown outside of it. His discoveries, made during the last dozen years of the 19th century, concern the way neurons, the building blocks of the brain, and you'll forgive me for speaking to you about science and the brain, but I think we have to have a starting point for all of us to join in the conversation. The building blocks of the brain, spinal cord, and nervous system communicate with one another. His theory, immediately accepted by most, but not strictly proven until the 1950s, was that neurons are in touch without touching. They communicate across infinitesimal gaps known as synaptic clefts. Through a chemical and electrical transmission, the single-stemmed axon of one neuron talks to the branched root-like dendrite of another. This process of synaptic messaging between unconnected cells came to be called the neuron doctrine, and in 1906, it earned Cajal the Nobel Prize in Physiology or Medicine. He shared it with the Italian histologist Camillo Golgi, who had devised a new method of staining tissue that Cajal also looked at, that singled out individual cells under the microscope instead of presenting tangled, illegible masses. An irony of the joint prize for revealing the structure of the nervous system is that Golgi remained entirely unconvinced by the neuron doctrine and true to reticular theory, which saw neurons as physically connected. It's incredible that two competing theories of the same phenomena shared the Nobel until the technology of microscopy caught up with it, and microscopes could see and prove the theory and hypothesis of Cajal. In his research, Cajal's two tools were the most powerful microscope he could find, which was quite basic by our standards, probably something like used in high school, and one of the oldest art techniques known, drawing, for which he had clearly tremendous talent. Looking through the lens, he saw with such acuity and drew so precisely in freehand that some of his renderings, as I mentioned, still appear in textbooks. And yet he also drew with such delicacy and vivacity that his drawings stand on their own as paragons of artistic expression, both mysterious and familiar. The drawings are at once fairly hard-nosed if you know your science. If you don't, they are deep pools of suggested motifs into which the imagination can dive. Their lines, forms, and various textures, dashes and faint pencil circles would be the envy of any modern artist. That they connect with surrealist drawing, biomorphic abstraction, and exquisite doodling is only the half of it. These small works evoke enough things you already know: landscape, weather systems, trees, that they might bring you back around to reality, implying the multiple purposes, if not universality, of certain natural structures. Root systems, go back. Functioning in different ways are found in trees, turnips, and the pyramidal neuron, which Cajal called the noble and enigmatic cell of thought. Born in Navarra, Spain, the son of a doctor, Cajal had always been artistic, with an innate distrust of authority and an obsessive compulsive proclivity. There's excellent writing in that catalog about relations to art and science, but also biographic information. At the age of 8, he drew everything around him and then set out to collect everything pertaining to birds. He taught himself photography, making carefully posed self-portraits throughout his life, a kind of nascent selfie artist. And he trained as an artist, but his father cajoled him toward medicine by enlisting him to make anatomical drawings as teaching aids. We showed, that shows the scale of the drawings. We also showed a collection of contemporary images of the brain using varying imaging techniques, as well as thought forms. An exhibition of works that included abstract paintings and drawings by Lauren Harris, alongside illustrations from Charles Leadbeater's The Chakras from 1927 and Annie Besant's Thought Forms from 1901, which might be familiar to many of you from Theosophy. These early 20th century works sought to visualize states of consciousness as well as explore themes of spirituality and mysticism. In addition, a selection of Robert Wilson's contemporary works from his Mind Brain series were exhibited. These works provided a counterpoint to the Cajal drawings. If Cajal was representing the structure of the brain and processes that he couldn't always see, these works are an attempt to represent the unseen aspects of the human mind, such as thoughts and emotions. How do we represent things that are felt? How can we give expression to sensations rather than what we can directly observe? In relation to art, it seems that there was an emphasis on making contact with the unconscious. The Harris sketches resemble automatic drawings where the conscious mind is suppressed to let the unconscious and the body have primacy. He then translated these marks into his canvases in which he seeks to communicate the spirit of a landscape, or maybe what he experiences as landscape rather than just what he sees. The illustrations from thought forms are perhaps trying to create a new visual language for the realm of emotions. So many things came out of this experience and of the exhibition and the wide range of programs and relationships that were developed. We had a writer and a psychiatrist come together in a conversation on memory. We had a concert where music students responded to the drawings of Cajal in original composition. We had a major international conference hosted jointly by the Belkin and Brain Health. And we had tours given dialogically, joint tours by graduate students from Brain Health and Art History to talk through what they were seeing together from their own disciplines and creating something new. We sowed the seeds for future collaborations. We had a semester-long seminar on neuroplasticity and more. I just want to share two of the things that really stay with me from this experience. One is the role for Cajal in drawing and actually developing an argument or a hypothesis. When you're looking at slides or still static images and you're trying to understand a process over time, it was the practice of drawing again and again these different slides that allowed him to develop a narrative and hypothesis to sense make through the ways of seeing and bridging these gaps. That's really stayed with me. The relationship between developing complex ideas through a practice, a compulsive, but a practice of drawing. And the second thing that really stays with me is a visit during that time by John Sulston, the Nobel laureate John Sulston, who was visiting family in Vancouver. And he came into the gallery and stayed for 3 days. We almost didn't close during that time. And he said he was reminded of something he'd forgotten, that drawing was a critical component of his training, that pedagogy and science and medicine and biology had always looked to drawing, visual expression and experience, so practice and theory as a fundamental part of what it means to do science, and that it couldn't be separated out. And somehow, somewhere along the way, that fell out of the pedagogy and the practice. And that at the end of his career, looking back, with all his accomplishments in teaching and students and the Nobel Prize, that he felt they'd missed the mark, and that this exhibition and seeing the works of Cajal reminded him of the power of looking and using the body to draw to really do science. And that has stayed with me in all the collaborations we've had since. And I hope that's something we can talk about too. I'd like to spend some time now on the third example I wanted to share with you today. Again, these are all brief introductions into these projects, so please do let me know if you'd like to hear more in another format. The third thing I'd like to share with you is an ongoing research cluster we're engaged in with the Quantum Matter Institute in Physics, and we hope to grow, called Artscientia. In 2021, we partnered with the QMI and Physics and Astronomy on a project meant to break down disciplinary barriers. The result was Artscientia, an ongoing UBC Research Excellence Cluster. We paired scientists and artists, and in fact, the scientists had to compete in a pecha kucha kind of event to get the privilege of working with the artists. There was quite a lot of competition, challenging these groups to create work that stepped outside of their respective disciplines and bridged the academic gap between art and science. We started by visiting the lab, so I'm just going to take you through while I speak, debating some pictures of these lab visits. The project fuses the praxis of arts and science in the emergent fields of interdisciplinary research and presents an opportunity to foster new modes of knowledge exchange across the art, science, and their pedagogies. The rules of the engagement for these artist residencies and collaborations was that they would be non-extractive, non-transactional, and that they'd be process-based and not product-based. And so the ask was just to come and be together over the course of 6 months to see if we could find a language to communicate and potentially projects to do together. We started that with a bi-weekly seminar and visits to each other's workspaces, labs, and studios. We posed many questions along the way, questions around the different roles played by the studio and the lab, the scientist and the artist. In such contexts, does the artist work with the scientist in a symmetrical collaboration between equals, or is the artist working for the scientist to help disseminate their findings? Or is the scientist in fact working for the artist who comes to represent the wider social context of the public good and its corollary public opinion? Or none of this, or all of it, or some version? Such questions about collaborations between artists and scientists are obviously worth asking, but why now? In part because the university has a unique role to play in thinking in fresh and generative ways about stubborn and critical impasses. Artists and scientists too often exist in their own disciplinary silos. Artscientia sets out to rewrite this narrative by engaging participating artists to join the artist studio, the humanities seminar room, and the science lab. Rather than science simply engaging artistic practice for the sake of science or vice versa, the purpose of our project is to offer an alternate reality where art and science meet as equals. Artscientia collaborations make possible vastly different projects and articulate together the diversity of art-science collaboration while attempting to trace possible connecting threads. We've been fundamentally interested in the myriad ways in which art and science intersect, interact, and combine, and often encounter work that cannot be neatly defined within either science or art. How might theoretical frameworks of both art and science be applied transversely, revealing the potential for methodologies and objects to operate in multiple ways or with multiple epistemic valences to occupy a hybrid art-science position? How might we problematize such neat epistemic categories as art and science? Collaborations between artists and scientists are not without their challenges. Both worlds employ scientific lexicons that can at times be jargonistic, and it can be awkward beginning to use one another's language. Recourse to metaphor and analogy becomes a first principle in communicating, but this can open up another discursive realm altogether with its own limitations and pitfalls. When it comes to collaboration, there is a danger that generalizing about scientists as rational, institutionalized, ends-oriented versus artists, emotional, free, process-driven, can risk accentuating disciplinary stereotypes, or conversely, that trying too hard to find commonalities can lead to simplistic platitudes about creativity. We are thankfully so much more than the disciplines we represent. Art and science must meet at the junction between disciplines. Art and scientists coincide in having the same drive to explore and understand what escapes our control, the shadows in our understanding of the complex world that surrounds us. Over the past 100 years or so, artists and scientists have come to follow increasingly common paths. from exploration to research to discovery, and from production to dissemination, first within their communities and then across broader society. Our project remains committed to fostering dialogue between artists and scientists to query the relationship between the two worldviews. These long-term interdisciplinary and cross-border collaborations provide artists with an opportunity to critically engage with the sciences and their experimental and aesthetic dimensions. This includes explorations of the site of the laboratory, as well as a range of scientific topics, methods, materials, and technologies. Our interests lie in the interaction and expansion of types of contemporary knowledge and artistic production, and the creative potential resulting from exploring the parallels and differences of the practices. It's been interesting to hear how our ciencia has impacted my partners in physics and at QMI. They talk about how their understanding of science, its language, and its key questions, and the dynamics of the laboratory has grown to an extent that they no longer separate the focus of the research from the process of making science. It's a unique time to be present at these kinds of laboratories where so many people are involved in one single question, which is to understand the fundamental structure of matter, for instance. Artists who come into the labs experience something quite extraordinary that shapes their general understanding of nature and learn about the possibilities for reaching levels of cognition and sensing natural phenomena and forms that were not imagined some decades ago. Artists often engage with the material culture of today, and science is an important element in this process, whether it's biological, ecological, or concerning any other media within the remit of the natural sciences. Artists, now more than ever, are experimenters, those who through detailed observation enact events that perform and devise the processes for new knowledge and inquiries to happen. The possibility of finding genuinely collaborative methodologies has significant implications for the university and beyond. Real reciprocity, real collaboration, and real interdisciplinary work too often seem to underdeliver. The initial step of finding profound intellectual and academic respect and reciprocity is often overlooked and is crucial when collaborating across disciplines. I want to share two examples of collaborations from our ciencia with you. In the first cohort, let me just see what's going on here. I'm going to show a series of stills and films from a collaboration between Daniel Korchinski, a physicist, and Josephine Lee, an artist, who came together to create collaborative research that called on both areas of expertise. They spent weeks initially walking, talking, picnicking, hiking, trying to see where they might build trust and find shared interests, foretelling the value of dialogue and developing a common language. They ultimately focused on a specific ideology of glass, the concept of lenses. And with a mutual curiosity in optical illusions, the two worked towards developing lens and glass work that could, for example, obscure objects instead of magnifying them. Their collaboration led to profound artistic work and also paved the way for real scientific insight. Optical lenses, Josephine Lee says, in general, have been constructed throughout time to magnify, focus, and clarify vision. We have eyeglasses, microscopes, telescopes, and all of these sorts of screens that mediate our vision in some way or another. With that visibility, she says, come questions of hypervisibility and what control or censorship or violence emerges from hypervisibility, especially for BIPOC bodies. Lee's artistic practice has been trying to refuse to be seen in some way. She asked questions like, what would it look like to design optical lenses that perform the opposite function of their intended purpose? How can you make a lens that for all intents and purposes looks absolutely clear, but by the shaping or configuration of it would allow the subject to disappear? Can one create obscurity or opacity, or just simply erasure or redaction in some way to give the hypervisible less visibility and shield or protect them in that way? And how might a theoretical physicist like Korchinski engage in such questions? The development of these pieces began as simulations coded by Korchinski of light rays passing through materials of varying indices of refraction. With the help of a professional glass blower, Lee and Korchinski worked with glass and explored how they could push the limits of the material. They were particularly interested in the paradoxes of glass, that it's so fragile and so unbreakable at the same time, depending on how you work with the glass. Is this not working? This one seems not to be working. As a theoretical physicist, Korchinski had limited experience of working with his hands. As a postdoc, he felt uncertain about devoting time to a project outside the scope of his thesis studies and his CV. As an artist, Lee recognized that she was asking questions about ideological territories Korchinski may have never visited. This collaboration yielded, among other outcomes, such as a scientific discovery, an extensive collection of textured and shaped glass pieces. These pieces serve to conceal, veil, and obscure the objects behind them, and they are mesmerizing. Korchinski additionally noticed some compelling physics related to the crackling noises heard when their molten glass was cooling. Let me just go to... He attributes his observations to Lee's encouragement to experience the glass-blowing studio with all his senses. The crackling noises are similar to other natural events, such as earthquakes and forest fires, which are governed by a concept called self-organized criticality. This means that small changes can cause big events. And this type of behavior is scale invariant, meaning it happens at vastly different sizes. The noise made during the cooling of molten glass also seems to have this type of behavior. In other words, the fracturing process in glass is similar to other systems that exhibit self-organized criticality. And as far as Korchinski knows, this specific phenomenon had not yet been reported in any of the peer-reviewed literature until his paper, which came out of this collaboration. That earlier film you saw with a shattering glass was only possible by collaborating with the Spinal Cord Center with the kind of incredible technology for photography that they have there. So this really pushed technologies and materials against the grain, as it were, with a lot of new knowledge production on both the arts and sciences done together. I want to talk briefly about one other collaboration and then open it up to discussion. The one I just showed you got to more of a completion stage. They're still working on it. There was a lot of work to show. I want to end by looking at something more speculative. And this is a project that brought together two artists, Kelly Leiken and Justine Chambers, together with a physicist, Kirk Madison. Kelly Leiken is an installation and photo-based visual artist. Justine Chambers is a movement-based artist whose practice is found in collaborative creation, close observation, and thinks about choreography as a living archive. And Kirk Madison, the scientist, deals with laser cooling and trapping, and he's an AMO specialist, atomic, molecular, and optical physics and condensed matter. So the name of the project is Gazing, Not Solving. And that came out of the seminars that I said we began the project with. And Kelly Leiken would sit in the seminars and developed a process of drawing to make sense of concepts that were very challenging for all of us to wrap our heads around, both in terms of having different lexicons and engaging in high-level research that we didn't have the tools necessarily for understanding one another. And this method she talked about of drawing to make sense became standard practice for some of the other physicists who still talk about this. So Gazing, Not Solving really tries to draw our attention to the use of different registers, different lexicons, different disciplines, engaging with different worldviews and methods, and that it's okay not to solve, that the gazing as a practice has a lot of value, and Gazing, Not Solving is not just the name of the art project that's coming out of this, the work, but it's kind of a mantra and a ethos and a methodology. One of the things that brought the three of them together, the two artists were interested in similar methods and way of seeing the world, but they were very interested in working with Kirk, who in his Pecha Kucha presentation talked about what he found in his office in his lab when he came to the QMI. And as he was cleaning out the detritus of an unknown former physicist occupant, he came across a massive treasure trove of Polaroids, of photographs. And when he was cleaning out the office filled with all this stuff from this researcher in the 80s, without knowing what it was, he intuited that this collection of images was worth saving. So he saved them from the dumpster and had no idea what he was going to do with them. Here they are on Zoom. We started the project during lockdown, looking through and explaining. The level of excess is hard to describe. There's so many photographs over the course of someone's research. What they discovered was that the person who had occupied the office was physicist Andrew Ng, a very important laser plasma researcher. And when Kirk rescued these photos, he saw the value of the collection. He did some research on Andrew Ng for the artists, explained a lot of the science and the technology and the methods for them that was being used in terms of lasers and staining, and helped them work through these piles and piles to understand past technology, impact, and process. They were really drawn to the visual aesthetic aspects of the collection, what it meant to engage them in such vast quantities, the legacy of photography as a metaphysics and a practice, what an archive is, how this relates to, again, like with the Kahal, certain relationships and aesthetics. But they were also really interested, I'm trying to get back to an image from, they were really interested in what happens when you move a collection from the laboratory to the artist studio. Suddenly thinking about the research beyond the institution, and Kelly talked in her presentation about what it meant to see it among the houseplants. This beautiful moment where scientific research is reappropriated into an everyday situation with the possibility for an alternative agency that this collection could have, and all the surprises there. She talked about in her presentation how the collection keeps unpacking itself. Now in the studio, like the lab, both places full of questions and full of doubts that allows the three of them to reflect on the parallels. This is still in a speculative stage. Kelly and Justine are thinking of a project that will invite artists to respond to this work. Similarly, they did a test case of that when they invited everyone involved in RCNCA to visit their studio and respond, both physicists and artists, to this collection. But it's a multifaceted project that's interested in translations from one kind of research to another, translation from the scientific to the artistic, an interest in visual aspects, the potential translation to sound work, to film work, to other artist responses, to installation, gazing, not solving, as an opportunity to reflect on critical questions. Like the residency itself, its interest is in process and not product, of finding a way to hold together wildly different models of practice. It is about searching out new ways to entangle multiple practices and to develop interdisciplinary modes. It offers space for experience, for the collaborative, for the mutable, for the space between practices to become a container for larger work. It's about dialogue among people, practitioners, and practices. And it centers on curiosity, on emergent properties, not on a fixed outcome, and work that comes from the interaction of the participants. And I want to end with a quote that Kelly ended with, that comes from Karen Barad. This project, Gazing Not Solving, is centered on relation and curiosity. Through the development, we are creating conditions for working that have no fixed outcome. An exhibition will occur, but the work will arise with the interaction between participants and materials. It is necessarily unfixed and responsive and borrows from Barad's notion of interaction. And so I hope we can end on holding the space for that questioning and the space between, and the radical potential of interaction. I think I'll stop there. Thank you very much.
Okay, well, so I will call that this is the official end of today's event. Thank you so much, Shelley, for your beautiful presentation about the intersections of art and science at the Belkin Gallery. And thank you all for joining us today, everyone, to learn a bit more about this and showing up for the research seminar series. We really appreciate your attendance and hope that you learned something new. So enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you so much.